Today at the National Press Club, OzHarvest CEO and founder, Ronni Kahn. To mark International Women's Day, she'll deliver the Women in Media National Press Club address, discussing her journey as a social entrepreneur. Ronni Kahn with today's National Press Club address.
Good afternoon and welcome to the National Press Club Westpac address. My name is Emma MacDonald and I am the Canberra convener of Women in Media and Associate Editor of Her Canberra. Today's address is the National Press Club's contribution to International Women's Day, albeit a day late, but well worth waiting for. We are delighted to welcome Ronni Kahn, a woman who has almost single-handedly put the issue of food waste on the national agenda, and you'll see her trademark yellow OzHarvest van parked out the front of the National Press Club today. Ronni's going to speak to us about how she discovered her purpose in life. If you would like to join in the conversation online, please use our handle Press Club Ost or the hashtag NPC. I'd now like to welcome Ronni to the podium.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to acknowledge that my feet are standing on Ngunnawal land, and I pay my deep respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all First Nation peoples. It is truly an honour to be here today, and I want to recognise that in this room today, each and every one of us are leaders, whether we have titles or not. We all are leaders, and it is up to us to be the best we can be. You know, when I was 15, I was called in to the principal of my school, who said, and being called into the principal of one's school is never a good thing, not at my school. And he called me and said, "We think that you should give an address to the whole school because we are considering you to be the head girl of our school." Now, I heard those words. I did not believe what I was hearing. I knew that I was not pretty enough. I was not smart enough. I did not believe that I could even be considered. And I turned around and said, "Thank you, but no." So I need you to know that standing here in front of you all, I have found my voice. And in a way, I want to acknowledge that shy little girl who was 15, my inner 15-year-old today, by standing here and sharing today's address. Thank you. Recently, I was on an ABC show, The School That Tried to End Racism. I don't know if any of you saw it, but it was a real eye-opener to me because there were 6 of us invited to be on this show, 6 professionals, a CEO, a doctor, a nurse, a dancer, a university lecturer, and a writer. And we all arrived into a school of 8-year-olds. And the whole purpose of the conversation was for the kids to choose which profession out of the 6 of us belonged to who. And within minutes, they called out when they looked at me and said, "Artist, writer, dancer." Now, luckily they didn't know that I have 2 left feet, but anyway, they did choose those 3 things. And I cannot tell you their surprise. There were 3 men and 3 women on this panel, and when I flipped over my name Ronni and said CEO, the little 8-year-old girls said, "We didn't know that a CEO could look like that." Now, I do admit that I might not look like the traditional CEO, and I was probably wearing way more yellow, if that's possible. But the truth is, that was my insight, and that obviously is why it is so necessary that we do educate and we do shift and change the self-limiting beliefs that we all have, as I had to get up on stage many, many times until this day where I am addressing you today, because we can say that society must change, but society is made up of each and every one of us. And until such time as we both educate, but shift and change our own narratives and our own beliefs about what is possible. And I guess that leads me into my story, but acknowledging that today is International Women's Day, and the theme of this year's International Women's Day is Break the Bias. And I do want to acknowledge the launch this week of the Enough is Enough is Enough campaign by Christine Holgate, Brittany, Grace, Lucy, those women, with the mantra of safety, respect, and equity. I think it's a hugely important way that those women are using their voices. So I did just want to acknowledge them today. So my journey is just such an unusual one, because if you'd have asked me when I was a child if I ever was going to had aspirations to run a charity, aspirations to be a leader, they were the furthest thing from my mind. So for anyone who thinks that maybe one day they want to be a charity leader, or any leader, that as a child you have to have those aspirations, I only came into my own at the age of 50. And I think that's really important to understand. You don't have to know what it is or who you are meant to be from the time you are growing up. But role modeling is such an important thing. And I didn't realize what an important role model my mother was. So my mother, unusually for her time, she'd have been 103 this year, went to university, as did her two sisters. My grandfather was an immigrant to South Africa, and you can probably hear from I sometimes say speech impediment, but I'll say my accent, that I was born in South Africa. And my grandfather's ambition was to be a doctor, but he arrived in the country at 18 with no language, no money, and of course, he never realized that dream. But he had 4 children. His son became a doctor, and his daughters all went to university and, of course, did the arts and humanities. And once they had finished university, they married and became housewives. Now, I know it is a very different era then, but to have gone to university was a big deal. But my mother did become a housewife, and that is what she was thrilled to be until such time as necessity forced her to really come into her own. My dad, unexpectedly, of course, an accident is an unexpected thing, had a car accident, which meant that for the next 2 years, he was in and out of hospital. And my mother had 3 children to look after, and she had to dig deep and find whatever it was that she could do to provide a living for us. Now, I didn't know at that time, of course, that this was role modeling. I also didn't know that every time she came home, she smiled. She never, ever, ever presented herself as a victim. So that kind of role model is quite extraordinary, but we subliminally absorb role modeling. And I say that because it's one of the things I share whenever I talk, because so many of us don't realize as leaders that it's who we are and what we do and how we act is what the people around us see and believe. And that goes for this very important subject of gender and how we treat every single person, and how the little 8-year-olds who think that a CEO doesn't look like me, and that the nurse and the doctor, they did, and this was a few months ago, this was not 20 years ago this program was done. The nurse and the doctor were assigned to males. So the point is, I was not given the skills, nor did I believe I had the skills to really do very much, except that as I grew, I realized one thing. The values, again, I was given values when I was brought up in South Africa. I was brought up during the apartheid era. And although my parents weren't brave and courageous and didn't fight that system, they certainly told us that everybody is equal and that nobody should be discriminated against, not by race nor by gender. But again, as a child growing up, who knows what you absorb and what you don't absorb until later on in my life. And I stumbled into this journey of mine. I loved the job that I had before I started OzHarvest, which I'll share with you, was very much sometimes looked like a room like this. As an event producer, which was what my business was before I started OzHarvest, I would create magic moments in the life of either a business or an individual. But one of the things that was absolutely common to all of my events was food. Because food is about dignity, food is about sharing, it's about respect, but it's also about abundance and generosity. And for me to show that my clients were successful, I would put and make sure that there was abundant food on those tables. Probably also being a Jewish mother didn't hurt, but there was no way I wanted anyone to leave my event and have to go to a fast food joint on their way home. And for years in my event business, I just threw away food. I will admit that, because I was working in remote places and I didn't know any better. I had the limitation in my mind that that's what happened at events. You started early, you finished late, whatever was there was left over, was thrown out if you couldn't give it to the staff and if there was more than the staff needed. Until one day, I did an event that was like a Roman banquet. It was for 1,000 staff. And this client really needed their staff to feel connected, and this was pre-COVID days. Connected, belonging, and they just went all out. And it's true, it was during the time when events were over the top, but I was really good at over the top. The tables groaned, there were wheels of parmesan, there were kegs of beer, barrels of wine, and it was just going to be this magnificent event. But my guests walked in, they saw those barrels and kegs of wine and drink, they drank, and they barely touched the food. And I had hundreds and hundreds of kilos of food. And there was no way that night that I could throw that food away. So I loaded what I could into a van, and I knew of only one place that I could think of taking it to. And in Sydney, it was the Matthew Talbot home, and it was right behind the Ferrari and the Porsche dealers. I'd never really been there, but I knew that it was there. And I thought at 2 a.m, I will just take it there. I drove in, and there's a mass of people and bodies and men hanging around. And I gingerly go up the stairs, knock on the door, and say, I have a van full of food, will you take it? It was confronting, it was challenging, but they said, give it to us. And it just made me realize how easy that was. And that was really the beginning of my rogue food rescue days, because when I could, I would tell my clients, it was wonderful, don't worry about having excess food, just sign on the bottom here that I can give it away. So I felt really like a bit of a Robin Hood. But the point is, I started doing more and more of that and realizing, and at that time, I just thought, I have now found a solution to the problem that I had. It still didn't occur to me that $36 billion worth of food goes to waste every year. I didn't know that then. I didn't know that 1 in 6 people in our country today suffer from food security or insecurity. I didn't know that. All I knew was I had a problem, let's take that food, let's solve that problem. Until I started realizing that there was more food than just I was wasting. So I went to other event producers and said, I'll take your food too. Then one day I walked into my local greengrocer. I said, what happens to the food that you can't use? They said, we throw it away. I said, well, if I could collect it, would you give it to me? They said, sure. And so OzHarvest was born. But I still worked in my business for the first 7 years because I didn't really understand and believe that this was a thing. I didn't understand that I was setting up both a social and environmental organization, because every time food waste does not go to landfill, it affects climate change. That is, I'll twist that around. Every time food goes to landfill, it's part of the climate crisis today. And so, in the beginning, I decided I'd set up this organization, call it OzHarvest. And in the beginning, there was one vehicle running around Sydney, and people would call me and say, we see your vans everywhere. One little van running around. But the truth is, once we started realizing the scale of the problem, everything changed. And so we grew. One of the challenges was that businesses did not want to give us their food. They started saying, well, we're a little nervous about that. What about our liability? Now, one of the things I think I'm known for is that I don't like people saying no to me. It's quite useful sometimes. But the point is, I figured, okay, that's a problem that we can solve. And so I got a bunch of pro bono lawyers together, and we lobbied and had the laws changed to allow good food to be given away for free without fear of liability to the business. One of the places that we gave food to, we'd collect food from when it started, was the MasterChef. When MasterChef had food left over, we would pick up from the set of MasterChef. And one day they called and said, we have a whole salmon on ice that we haven't used. Would you come and fetch that? And we had to think of which charity we could give it to that would know what to do with it. So found a charity, picked up that salmon in a vehicle that's refrigerated. All our vehicles are refrigerated, with a driver that's trained in safe food handling, and delivered that food, that whole salmon, to an agency. The next day, the chef called me, and I said, so how did it go? Tell me how it went. Did they love that fish? And he said, well, actually, they told me they thought it was off. And I said, what do you mean? Didn't you tell them it had been on ice? We'd collected it. It was safe. It was beautiful, fresh. And he said, yeah, but they told me they thought it was off because it was pink. They'd never seen pink fish, which meant for us that we now had to go into an education process, how we could shift and change how people see food, value food. And we then rolled out 3 education programs. Nest, which teaches vulnerable people how to cook, how to live a sustainable life, how not to waste food. Our Feast program, which goes into primary schools, and we are just trying to launch it into high schools. Again, teaching both teachers and children how to live a sustainable life, to be eco-warriors, to be eco and climate warriors, because quite honestly, we have to take climate change seriously, and we have to take our gender bias seriously. When I think about my mother, who was quite unusual and managed to actually allow herself to go to work, because in South Africa at that time there was help. In Australia today, the reason that it is so difficult for women to go to work is because childcare is so fundamentally out of reach. It is absolutely unaffordable. And that has to shift and change, not just for the women in the family, but so that anyone who chooses to work has a family has an option to have affordable childcare. It would also be remiss of me not to acknowledge right now that in our country today, we've been through bushfires, we've been through drought, and right now the floods are taking place as we speak. And the brunt of many of these disasters affect women more than they affect men. It is just, unfortunately, that is a fact. And we need to make this, we need to fix this. And when I talk about self-limiting, limiting the way that we ourselves limit ourselves, each and every one of us has to shift and change how we treat others, how we can do the very best for each other. The fact that right now it took so long for real support to get into the ground, onto the ground. I was speaking to the resilience teams that have set up, the civilian teams that have been set up in the Northern Rivers, in Lismore, in Queensland. And it's interesting because these are civilians that have absolutely come to the fore. That is what we see in times of crisis, that civilians are extraordinary. And absolutely extraordinary. And they are doing the absolute best. Private helicopters have been winching individuals from places that they couldn't get out of. And we need our ADF, we need our people to be on the ground servicing every single one of the Australians that are feeling it right at this very moment. To get back to the things that I didn't know, the things about food waste that I didn't know, I want to share with you that today the chef, beautiful chef inside the press club, shared with me, and I'm so thrilled that you got to eat your lunch before I talk, because normally people hate eating lunch with me because they don't want to leave anything on their plates. But I do want to share with you that there were the lentils and the vegetables in your dish today had been rescued through the week, as in made sure, the chef told me that he made sure that nothing was wasted, and that there are beautiful bliss balls, I think, that are part of your dessert today. And the chef shared with me that that was collected and used up every bit of beautiful sweets that he's had through the week. So I hope that you recognize and enjoy the fact that none of us should waste food. So I want to leave you with a thought, because I've mentioned that each and every one of us needs to be the best that we can be. That I've been given this gift. The gift was that I took an opportunity. It's not that I am special. What I did was I took an opportunity and ran with it and turned it into an organization that now has a significant impact because we need it. But I want to share with you a little story, a quote that I came across and is actually in the afterword of my book, but I think it's so powerful, and it goes like this. In the event of a huge conflagration, like a fire, each of us has three principal options. Each of us as humans has three principal options as to how we would behave. Number one, we could look at that fire and we can run away as fast as we can and leave those that cannot run to burn. Number two, we can write an angry letter to the newspaper demanding that the perpetrators be punished. Or number three, we can run and find a bucket. And if we cannot find a bucket, we can find a jug. And if we cannot find a jug, we can find a teaspoon, because every single one of us has a teaspoon. Now, I know that that fire is huge and the flames are enormous. And a teaspoon is tiny, but there are millions of us, and each and every one of us can use our teaspoons. So I would like to create the order of the teaspoon, where each and every one of us wears a teaspoon on our lapel or around our necks like I do, or as part of a ring to remind us to use our teaspoons every single day. So what I'm going to ask you all to do is, would you please all put your hands together like this? And would you look down into your hands? Because in your hand is your metaphorical teaspoon. Now, I know that in this room, each and every one of you is a doer. But take your teaspoons, and could you put them in your heart? And could you make sure that you use your teaspoons every single day with either random acts of kindness, random acts of goodness, or ways in which you can make a difference to somebody else. And I do know that listening here today, there are people who might have swimming pools that they could use, not just buckets. And some of us might just have a jug. And some of us might just have a teaspoon. But it is incumbent on all of us to use it, and to use it well. Now, I do have a teaspoon here. Is there anyone brave or courageous enough very quickly to come up and get a teaspoon so that it will remind them of what it is they have to do? And it's first in, first best dressed. I will hold you accountable. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that wonderful speech, Ronni. Also, no notes. That was from the heart. It's not usual that we see that at the press club, so very well done. Now, we've got some questions from the working press here today, but before I hand over to them, I wanted to ask you one thing briefly. We had Brittany Higgins and Grace Tame deliver an address here last month. It's International Women's Week 2022. Does their experience shock you? Why are we here?
Absolutely. All I can say is thank God they're using their voices. When we understand and hear that the stats, I think it's 1 in 4 women at some point will suffer from domestic violence or family violence. It is outrageous, it is time to stop, and it is phenomenal that they are using their voices.
All right, we'll hand over to Lani Scar from the West Australian.
Hello, Lani Scar from the West Australian. I'm also on the Board of Women in Media here in Canberra. Thank you so much for your really inspiring speech. It was incredible to hear and amazing, as Emma said, that you were able to do it from the heart without any notes at all. As an innovator in the food waste and philanthropic space, I'm wondering where you think there are gaps that could be filled with regards to the government and business working together effectively in times of crisis or natural disasters. You obviously referenced them in your speech. I'm wondering how we can make those things work more effectively. I'm also wondering, we've had a strong focus on women in politics over this past year, obviously because of the horrific circumstances that we've seen revealed throughout the year. And we know there's a strong need to have more women in politics. I'm wondering if someone like yourself would ever run for politics to create real change there.
Okay, I'll answer the last question first. I think I can be so much more effective not in politics. So I will use my voice. I will support women. I will be a role model if that is useful. But it seems to me that politics is just not where I'm at. So that's that question. The first part around the food system. Well, there's not even any doubt that, first of all, it's not like we don't know that this country suffers from fires, drought, and floods. How is it that in 2022 we are still so unprepared? I don't have an answer for that. The only thing I do have is clearly we need more women in leadership. But there is absolutely a place for a food security committee, quorum, so that during disasters like this, we can get food out. You know, OzHarvest is an emergency relief organization and a food rescue organization, but we're not set up to deal with disasters. I don't have trucks that have got four-wheel drives that can plow through rivers. And so we will be feeling the after effects of this for years to come, as we have and will with COVID, you know. So there absolutely is room for better preparation on every level, not only just the food supply chain, but for emergency. Thank you.
Our next question is from Julie Hare from the National Press Club Board.
Hi, Ronni. Thanks very much for your speech. I'm Julie Hare. I'm from the Australian Financial Review, and I'm also on the Board of Directors of the National Press Club. My question is this. OzHarvest has always had a lot of corporate support, no doubt through a lot of work of your own, and one of the co-founders of Canva is on your board. I'm wondering whether corporates have held up their end of the social contract during the pandemic, especially since a lot of non-profits say corporate donations haven't come back since the economy reopened. I'm just wondering if you could share your experiences.
Thank you. You know, in a way, I think that OzHarvest might be fairly unique in that what we do makes so much sense. There's nobody, food touches every single individual. And this is not to say that out of the 60,000 extraordinary charities that exist, that anyone is more worthy or less worthy. But from our points of view, we have found generosity both from an individual point of view as well as a corporate point of view. And we do have lots of corporate partners. And from our points of view, in terms of helping us securing, making sure that food can get from one place to the next, as well as getting food, they have not let us down. So it would be very hard for me to talk about what they're doing with others when our personal experience is they are ready and willing to support.
can you just also talk to me about the supply chain crisis, especially during situations that we've got at the moment during mass floods, and how you see your role in that playing out?
Yeah. So the supply chain issue is huge, and it started at the beginning of COVID, obviously through bushfires. Then there was COVID. I mean, shelves were empty. If you think about it, in terms of the supermarkets, shelves were empty. We get a lot of our surplus food from the back end of supermarkets. When there's nothing on the front shelves, there's nothing on the back shelves. So in terms of the supply chain, it is severely challenged. All of the time that you're reliant on individuals, drivers, and vehicles, it makes it incredibly difficult when COVID affects individuals. And I'm not suggesting that we have electric vehicles with no drivers. I'm just saying we have and struggle with supply chain. And for the very, very first time since COVID, OzHarvest has had to purchase food because the supply, I know, you're as shocked as I was when I realized that I had more mouths to feed. There was an extra 1 million people in need through COVID. And I don't care what the government tells us, those numbers are not going down. Those people who lost their jobs we can go into that, but the point is that for the very first time, we had to purchase food. So that has shifted and changed through COVID, but we got funding to do that because people needed food. But the supply chain issues are very relevant for the very first time. Also, during the floods in Queensland, there was one day that we could not get our drivers out.
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ronni, just to further Julie's question about the corporates, reading your book, A Repurposed Life, gives a really glowing insight to some incredible acts from some big corporates, one of whom I won't say the name on the ABC, but a large supermarket chain that actually gave you a really talented manager, handed you one of their best staff so that you could run your free supermarket. Tell me though, are they doing the right thing in cutting their own waste, or does it have to be the consumer that is going to kick and scream and make it an issue? Behind the scenes, are they doing the right thing?
You know, with that particular entity that you are talking about,
you'll have to read the book, everyone.
You'll have to read the book because we can't say who they are. Honestly, their leader is an extraordinary leader, and their commitment to halving food waste, to zero food waste, is genuine. And so from our points of view, part of the reason to upscale our education programs is if we are fighting to stop waste on the one hand, we need to elevate and educate and minimize the amount of people that need food. But there is a genuine commitment to zero food waste.
That's good to know.
It is good. I can't say that for every business, but certainly that business.
Next question is Maeve Bannister from AAP.
Hi, Ronni. Thanks for your speech today. Just following on from Julie's question about supply chain issues impacting OzHarvest in particular, the rising cost of living is obviously also a massive issue. How do you see that as impacting your work and charitable organisations more broadly in terms of more people needing support as in the future?
We're already feeling that impact. Between the cost of living, COVID, and now another natural disaster means that there will be more and more people, we're already facing it, needing food. And so from our points of view, of course, we are a philanthropic organization that is completely sustained through philanthropic donations. In terms of the supply chain, there is enough food to feed every Australian. If we did not waste food for 6 months in this country, it would be enough to feed every Australian. So the issue is in terms of food waste, we have to become food waste warriors. And the beautiful thing is, for every single one out there who wants to become a climate change activist or who wants to become an eco warrior, you can do this in your own home. The minute you stop wasting food and use it up, and we have a campaign to use it up, not only will you in your own household save money, you will help Australia achieve the UN SDG goal, which Australia is committed to halve food waste by 2030.
Thank you.
Ronni, you are being beamed into many living rooms around the country.
Yeah.
What are some top 3 tips on using up what you've got so that we can actually put our money where our mouth is and become food warriors in our own homes?
Beautiful. Thank you for asking. So first of all, we have a mantra. Look, shop, look, buy, cook, store. Look what is in your fridge before you go shopping. Look what's in your pantry. Make a shopping list. That is going to save every one of you out there thousands of dollars because it stops impulse buying. Number 2, buy what you need. So that is, use up what's in your pantry, buy what you need, store it well, cook it, and use it up. But really, don't buy 2 for 1. So for example, if there's a special where there's 2 lettuce for the price of 1, you know very well that the chances are there'll be slimy, grungy lettuce in your fridge at the end of the week. That's false economy. So it's really being mindful about what we buy.
Are there any real offenders in terms of food products that never get used up? I'm just thinking of the 4 million bananas that have come into our household and exited into the worm farm without a single person biting one.
Have you heard of banana smoothies, banana bread, banana muffins, fritters?
It's not happening, Ronni. I'm sorry. Are there
Freeze them, buy less.
I've stopped. There's a banana campaign happening. We no longer will have.
No, obviously it's bread, it's vegetables, milk, and dairy. So honestly, we have a little new product. It's called, this is not commercial because you can get it from us for free. That's okay, right? It's called Use It Up tape. Because we've done a lot of research. We worked with Melbourne University. We work with behavioral scientists. And we looked at the matrix of behavior. What are the easiest behaviors to get us to shift our behaviors? Because we've stopped valuing food. We're a convenience society. We want quick food, and we have stopped really understanding where food comes from. And so our Use It Up tape, the research has shown that if we use it up, number 1, it will cost us less, but number 2, we will save an enormous amount of food from going to waste. And it's kind of gamified. So our Use It Up tape, you take it, you stick it on a shelf in the fridge, you stick it in your pantry on an apple if you've got an apple in your cupboard and in your pantry, and a new one comes in, which to use up first. And the research has shown that we are saving 30% more with Use It Up tape. So everyone can have access to it. You can also do it yourself and make your own, but I didn't think I was allowed, so I didn't bring any to show anybody. Do any of my people have any? No, but the point is you can go onto the OzHarvest website and we would love every single person to use it up. Think about how you use up what you've got.
And before we go to the next question, how much is the average household wasting on food that they send into the worm farm or into the bin each year?
Between $1,500 and $3,000 households are wasting on food waste. But the damage that it's doing to the climate, to our planet, is irreparable. So we have got to take action.
Next question is Nick Stewart from the Canberra Times.
Thank you very much for such a powerful speech. can I firstly say that my editor has in fact been in touch and just wanted to reassure everybody that writing a letter to the editor is perhaps one of the most powerful pieces of civil action that anyone can take. Secondly, you as an individual have come up with this obviously brilliant scheme. You've actually made it work. You've taken it, ushered it through the Parliament, the necessary legal challenges and changes to make something work. Why is it that our politics didn't come up with something like this beforehand? Why is it that now we've got two big political parties, numerous other political parties? They are all extremely, they tell us that they've got their ear to the ground. They're listening to people and they're desperately attempting to try and find resolutions to the current situation, the current problems. Why is it, do you feel, that our political system isn't coming up with the sort of alternative that you've managed to create?
You know, I think civil society comes up with many, many solutions that our politicians don't and that our leaders don't. I think in my case, I've probably had 1,000 people come to me and say, I should have, could have, would have, might have, thought of doing it, but never did. So I don't know why I was the gifted one who was given this opportunity or saw it and ran with it. But our political leaders don't see the small problems. They think that if they deal with the big things, the small issues, but the small issues are the big issues of the day. And I think they are blind and deaf. I mean, that is really all I can say. Our planet is burning up, and we have leaders who haven't accepted that yet. So what can I say? I'm pleased that I did it. But our continuing journey is to get those politicians on board to support us. You know, every single dollar that we raise allows us to deliver 2 more meals to people in need. 6 million people in this country today, in this abundant, generous, extraordinary country, need food relief at some point in the year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question is Katie McLeod.
Just to actually add something to your question, perhaps that's why I'm not in politics, because I don't have an answer as to why they're not doing this.
Go ahead, Katie.
Hi, Ronni, thanks so much for your speech. I'm Katie McLeod. I work at NCA Newswire. You've just spoken about our political leaders, and you spoke before about the need for better emergency management as we face more natural disasters. What specifically would you like to see governments do now to help people through the flooding crisis, and what do you think of their response so far overall?
Thank you so much for that question. This week it was announced that $1,000 will be given to those individuals who've suffered from the floods. That is the same amount that was given 15 years ago. That number needs to be upped. It needs to be at least 3,000. So I stand with ACOS that this week is demanding that that figure of $1,000 becomes at least $3,000. I think that right now they need to be moving faster than they have. It's unconscionable. I mean, we have a defence force that we are fortunate is not in use defending our country on any of our borders right now. Why are they not supporting us? Thank you.
Next question is Megan Doherty from the Canberra Times.
Hi, I'm Megan Doherty from the Canberra Times. You're obviously a leader and people obviously take notice of what you do and say. I noticed recently your Twitter account was suspended. Was that due to sharing misinformation about the Prime Minister, or can you explain why that was? And what do you see as your role with the upcoming federal election? Because you are an influencer.
Yeah. So I don't think I've spread any misinformation about our Prime Minister that I knowingly have done. I didn't know that my Twitter account was suspended. So you've just shared something with me. Can my people get onto that? No, only kidding. What do I hope for the election? I hope that more women are elected. I think that if we have women in power, the world would be a better place. We need the feminine side to be stronger. Yeah.
And I guess in terms of women, you talked a lot about your mum. What do you think your mum would think of what you've achieved so far?
I think she'd be blown away, much like I am every single day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ronni, you, that was a great question. Ronni, you admit that there was a period in your life where you lived a very lavish, wasteful lifestyle. Sydney's high life, we all know how that goes. What is your lifestyle like now?
I wouldn't say the exact opposite, but my lifestyle today is about intentional living. It's about being mindful and aware, and is so far removed from that life. You know, I grew up with a family that didn't have a lot of money, and growing up, all I had to do was always just make do, and so when I was given the opportunity to have that moment of lavish princess kind of life, I grabbed it, but it made me feel so uncomfortable when I realized what it had done to me. So my life today is, I don't have a job. I am so lucky that I've not had a day of work ever since the day that I started OzHarvest. That every day I wake up with enormous gratitude. Gratitude that I have a bed, gratitude that there's a roof over my head, that I can look out of a window. And I hope that I live with awareness and an ability to listen and to learn and to be curious. And yeah, it's not about the things that one can have. It's not about the things that, the possessions. I own my possessions, they don't own me. And it's about trying to live a life that's meaningful and precious and purpose-led. You know, people ask me all the time, where do you find purpose? And it would be so easy if it was on a supermarket shelf, or we could just find it, grab it, and pop it in. But in truth, it's when you look in the mirror. It's the things that bring you joy every single day. That's where you find purpose. And it's as long as what it is that you do adds value to somebody else, is not harmful to anybody else. So I live my life with intentionality.
Now, clearly, Twitter hasn't been going so well for you.
Clearly not.
But I just wonder whether you have any concerns that social media is really putting a barrier between living intentionally and finding a purpose, and this race for acquisition and the falsehood of Instagram. I mean, do you worry?
Absolutely. You know, when I shared that story of being 15, we didn't have Instagram then, but you know, people were brutal. We still had precociousness. We still had people checking if you were pretty or you weren't and sharing that. I think the lens of social media today is horrific, and I think that it does preclude authentic living, because people feel that they get sucked into having to be something and present themselves as something. And I think that's also a challenge with leaders, because I think true leadership is about real authenticism. You know, when I think about businesses talking about their values, and they say authenticity, integrity, honesty, and I think, seriously, if those are your values, I mean, surely that is just par for the course. Surely you could have more significant, deeper, meaningful values. You know, the values at OzHarvest are boldly courageous, with gratitude. It's really about, you know, nourishing and things that are outside of the core, basic, authentic living. So I think social media is a huge challenge in today's
And any
world.
12-year-old girls in the audience listening should probably stay away from getting their own.
Definitely stay away.
All right, now we have a student from Canberra Grammar School, Lily Feeks.
Hi, I'm Lily from Canberra Grammar School, and I would just like to say firstly thank you so much for being a role model to not only us at Canberra Grammar but also so many women and young women across Australia. My question is, I'd love to hear your perspective on how you think that the modern fad diet of the plant-based diet has affected food consumption and waste in Australia.
Great question. I don't know that it's affected food waste. I think it might affect our bodies and how we feel, but there's absolutely no doubt that if we eat less meat, and I'm not suggesting we don't eat meat, it would allow for us to have less cattle potentially on land, but I don't know that a vegetarian diet or plant-based diet has caused less waste. I would be making it up if I said that that was true.
Thank you very much.
I think healthy eating and a healthy diet is about a balanced diet. Lots of fruit, lots of vegetables, protein, whatever one can get. So I certainly don't, I'm not a proponent of cutting out anything from a diet.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lily. Before the next question, I just wanted to quickly ask, you seem a very positive person, and in your book, it is clear that the universe has provided you with exactly what you need at the exact moment that you have needed it, and it's really worth reading for that alone. Right now, with everything that's going on, including the war in Ukraine, which may be very triggering for you because you have actually lived through a war and you've had a husband fight and you've lost friends in war, how do you stay positive, and do you get overwhelmed and anxious like the rest of us?
Well, it's an interesting thing because it's hard to admit that I don't actually get overwhelmed. I got overwhelmed before I did my speech today. That's about the most overwhelmed I have, because I do believe, I do have a positive outlook. There's not even any doubt about it. I saw my mother survive my dad's accident, never without a smile. My dad, who was left disabled, really, never thought of himself as a victim, climbed up ladders, never complained. So I think I've been given a triple dose of positivity, of energy, and I don't have to work hard because I do believe that the universe does provide what we need. So it's always awkward for me because it's like, it sounds like, how could it be possible? But through grace and challenge, you learn to know that really all we have is this day. And if we can be the best we can on this, at this moment, we're all very scared of death, but it lives with us. And until such time as we really recognize that this is all we have, right here, right now. So what does it help me to be overwhelmed about something that's going to happen? I am absolutely devastated about the war that is taking place right now. But I have to believe that that magnificent leader, that his passion and power will overcome the guns. And so I try and find ways, and it's to stay positive.
I'll try to. We will now have a question from Astrid Watts from Journability News.
Hi Ronni, thank you so much for your speech and also pointing out that disability isn't the end of the world. First of all, I just want to say on behalf of my community of Wyndham on the far south coast, who OzHarvest the bushfires happened to hit our community, you guys have delivered weekly to our community to help us continue with our food. My question to you is how, as a community, can we volunteer for OzHarvest? How can we get involved?
Phenomenal, thank you. There are 3 ways that people can get involved in OzHarvest. The one is time, and by time I mean volunteering, but by all means, volunteer in any of those 60,000 organizations out there, but volunteering is just so valuable. We need food. If there are businesses out there, in every single business today that deals with food should have a food waste policy and should be giving it to OzHarvest or making sure that it does not go to landfill if there's surplus. And money. You know, not everybody has time and not everybody has food. But when you know that $1 can go so far as to feed 2 meals, there's not a lot you can do with 50 cents these days in Australia. But so all of our charitable organizations need funding. And so those are the 3 ways, and we would love to have volunteers because volunteers are the core of OzHarvest. I have 195 staff, but almost 4,000 volunteers, without which we would not be able to deliver food and do the things that we do.
Wonderful, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think we've only got 2 more questions left. Donna, is it? Felicity. Sorry.
Thanks, Ronni. My name's Felicity. I work with small businesses and I'm curious about how critical it was for you at the beginning of turning your opportunity into a one-off, into a venture, into a business, and then hopefully into a movement. How critical was it for you to actually push up against some legislations and regulations because you were doing something new and uncharted? And if you hadn't have been bold and courageous, as you've mentioned, would it have taken off in the way that it has, and would it be the success that it is if you hadn't perhaps pushed up against some of those regulations around food safety and other types of standards?
I think it's pretty fair to say that it would not have succeeded, and that resilience, perseverance, and pushing back are essential traits to get any venture off the ground. You know, not giving up, not taking no for an answer.
And how did one woman do that? And what advice would you have for other social entrepreneurs that feel alone, you know?
So first of all, I don't believe I've done that on my own. You know, I'm surrounded. I say I'm a magnet for magnificent people. I'm surrounded by extraordinary people who make me shine. But the truth is, I think you do need to believe so strongly in an idea, and it needs to be of benefit. You know, just to start a new business for the sake of making more money for yourself, I don't think has got the same value as starting a business, even if it is going to make money for yourself, but not deciding right from the beginning that a percentage of your profit will go somewhere. That will already add value to your business. So it's about, not giving up and being boldly courageous.
Thank you.
All right, this is the final question, and it's a biting and insightful one from the Press Club CEO.
No, this is from actually Tim Shaw, one of our directors. Ronni, Clean Up Australia Day became international with Clean Up the World. Has the OzHarvest example gone global, and where in the world does it need to be started? And I have a quick follow-up question.
Thank you so much. So OzHarvest is now in New Zealand as Kiwi Harvest. There was no way they were going to not call it, you know, and they changed. It looks exactly like our brand, except it's lime green, because there was no yellow and gold in New Zealand. We're in the UK as UK Harvest. We're in South Africa Harvest. Japan Harvest is just starting. And we've shared our model and educated and shared what it is we do, and we will share with anyone, anywhere, because good food needs to feed bellies and should not and must not go to landfill.
And Emma, very quickly, why yellow?
Why yellow? Because it's bright, it's warm, it's sunny, and it's very visible. And I'd never studied marketing, but it's hard to miss a big yellow vehicle that's driving around like a bee. It's hard to miss.
All right.